Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Mukham karoti vachanam pangam langyate girim yatkrpatamaham vande Shri Gurudena Taranam Paramanandam Madhavam Shri Guru Paramananda Premananda Palakada Prajananda Padananda Sevayam Anyoja. Hare Krishna. Thank you for joining. So last week we had completed 5:16, which was a description of Jambudvip. And to quickly recap, Jambudvip was described as the innermost center island of Bhumandal. So the Bhumandal is itself composed of there is that inner disk and then 6 concentric circles. So we have, they're called dvipas. So we have Jambudvip, Lakshadvip, and then Shalmali Dvip, Kushadvip, Karunshadvip, and so on, all the way to the outermost, which is Pushkar Dvip. So right now, Sukadev Goswami, he is focusing on the description of the innermost Jambudvip, and it describes how at the middle of Jambudvip is Mount Meru or Mount Sumeru, and how Mount Sumeru is surrounded by 4 forests, and then by 4 mountains, and then by a filament of mountains called the Kesachal. So this is relevant because in the next chapter, he will describe the path of river Ganges. It falls on Mount Meru and then goes into these mountains. He will also talk about the characteristics of the people in living in the different varshas of Jambudvip, not the different dvipas, but the different varshas of Jambudvip. So just to get a orientation of where we are, so Jambudvip is divided into 9 varshas by mountains that are running vertically and horizontally. And the southernmost mountain is called the Himalaya. Now this is different from the Himalaya that we have on Earth. This is a much taller, it's several thousand miles tall. And this is actually the abode of one of the abodes of Lord Shiva. We see over here there are 3 abodes of Lord Shiva that are described. One is on the top of Mount Meru as one of the Lokapals. One is as a resident of Ilavarta, and one is in Himalaya. And south of this Himalaya is the Bharatvarsha. And then Bharatvarsha is further divided into 9 khandas. And the southernmost khanda is again called the Bharat Khanda. It's also called the Navadvipa, the 9th island, and that is where we live. So we are part of the universe. So with that background, we'll start with the next chapter. It's a very interesting chapter, which is this is 5:17, which is the descent of the river Ganges, and the chapter has 24 verses. The first 10 verses describe the glories and the descent and the path of Ganga. Then the next 4 verses describe the 9 varshas of Jambudvip. So we talked about how Jambudvip by horizontal and vertical mountains is divided into varshas. The one at the extreme north is called the Uttar Kuru, and the one at the extreme south, as we mentioned, is Bharatvarsha. And then the final 9 verses are praised by praise to Lord Sankarshan by Lord Shiva. So, and this becomes the theme of the next chapter also. So, in each of these 9 varshas of Jambudvip, there is a presiding deity. Just like Sankarshan is for Ilavat Varsha, Rishikesh is for Ketumal Varsha, and Hayashir is for Bhadrasva Varsha. And there is also a presiding devotee. Presiding devotee in the sense prominent devotee. Right? So just like in Ilavat, Lord Shiva is the prominent devotee. In Himapurusha, the presiding deity is Lord Ram, and the prominent devotee is Hanuman. So the next chapter talks about again the prayers by the devotees to the deities in the corresponding varsha. Okay, so we'll start with the first verse. So verses in prose. So San Prabhu, if you don't mind, can you read the translation?
Prabhu. Sukadev Goswami said, "My dear king, Lord Vishnu, the enjoyer of all sacrifices, appeared as Vamanadev in the sacrificial arena of Bali Maharaj. Then he extended his left foot to the end of the universe and pierced a hole in its covering with the nail of his big toe. Through the hole, the pure water of the causal ocean entered this universe as the river as Ganga River. Having washed the feet of the Lord, which are covered with reddish powder, the water of Ganga acquired a very beautiful pink color. Every living being can immediately purify his mind of material contamination by touching the transcendental water of the Ganges. Yet, its water remained ever pure. Because the Ganges directly touches the lotus feet of the Lord before descending within this universe, she is known as Vishnu Padi. Later, she received other names like Jahnavi and Bhagirathi. After 1,000 millennium, the water of the Ganges descended on Dhruvaloka, the topmost planet in this universe. Therefore, all learned sages and scholars proclaim Dhruvaloka to be Vishnupada, situated on Lord Vishnu lotus feet.
So Sukadeva Goswami is now describing the descent of Ganga. So this is covered over here. It's covered later on also. I believe in the 8th canto it's covered again, and a little bit more details where the pastime of Maharaj Sagar and his 60,000 sons, etc. is described. Here he is describing it more from a perspective of the topological feature of the Bhumandal. But because it's connected to the Lord, he does start off by establishing that connection. That when Vaman Dev and his roop of the Trivikrama, excuse me, in his form of Trika, when he took his giant steps, then one of his steps, he was able to take only 2 steps, one for the lower planets and one for the upper planets. Hare Krishna. And when he was taking his steps for the upper planets, then he was extending his left foot. And the nail of his big toe, it pierced a small hole in the in the universe, and then we know that the universes are like, Prabhupada describes them as small balls that are floating in the causal ocean. And the water of the causal ocean is considered to be spiritual, because who's lying on the causal ocean? Mahavishnu, Karnadaksha Vishnu, is he's lying, and it said that the water actually comes from his body. It's from it's his respiration. Just like Garbhodaksha Vishnu, by water of his body, he creates the Garbhoda ocean. Karnadaksha Vishnu, he creates the Karan Sagar. So that water then comes into the universe. So the water to begin with is pure. Now it has also washed the lotus feet of the Lord. So it has become even more pure. And now that is not enough. After that, it falls, Dhruva Maharaj accepts it on his head. And Lord Brahma, he, with his kamandalu, he prays in it. And then Lord Shiva accepts it on his head. And then it comes to us. So one can only fathom the purity of it. That the water to begin with has a spiritual source. And then it is imbued by the potency and the mercy of the Lord and his devotees. And Lord Brahma, Lord Shiv, Dhruva Maharaj, and then it comes to us. That is why Ganga is so special. And we can see that in Sukadeva Goswami, right? He calls Ganga as Vishnupadi. Vishnupad, from the lotus feet of Lord Vishnu, Bhagavadpadi. And then he said it's also called as Bhagirathi, because Bhagirath, and this is the pastor that I'll describe later on, that Bhagirath was one of the descendants of Sagar. Well, actually, by his austerities, he will get this benediction of getting the Ganga down to the earth planet. So that's why it's called Bhagirathi, daughter of Bhagirath. It's also known as Jahanvi. And this is a pastime that happened that when Ganga came down, then King Bhagirath, with a chariot, he was leading the Ganga to where his ancestors were. They had been burned by the. So when they found the horse near the ashram of Lord Kapila, they thought that Lord Kapila had stolen the horse. So they became very angry. And there are slightly different interpretations of how they died. According to certain commentators, that when they took up arms to attack Lord Kapila uttered the sound hum, and by that they all burnt. And then according to some commentators, they burned by their own envy and anger towards the personality of Godhead. But when Bhagirath was taking Ganga down to the lower end of the universe, then it was going through the ashram of Jahanu Rishi, and he felt very disturbed by the force of the water. So, being a great mystic, he drank the water, the whole river. He drank the whole river, and then Bhagirath, who was going forward with the chariot, then realized that he could not hear the sound of the water behind him. So he turned back and saw there was no river. So then he retraced his step, and finally he comes to the ashram of Janu, and he realizes what happens. So he prays to him. And now Janu Rishi cannot regurgitate the water because then it would become unclean. So again, by his mystic powers, he creates a hole in his knee, and the water comes out from there. And so because she was produced by Jahanu, she is also known as the daughter of Jahanu, which is Jahanvi. Srila Prabhupada comments on this that the water of Ganges is known as Patita Pavani, the deliverer of all sinful living beings. It is a proven fact that a person who regularly bathes in the Ganges is purified both externally and internally. Externally, his body becomes immune to all kinds of diseases, and internally, he gradually develops a devotional attitude towards the personality of Godhead. Throughout India, many thousands of people live on the banks of Ganges, and by regularly bathing in their waters, they are undoubtedly being purified both spiritually and materially. Many sages, including Shankaracharya, have composed prayers and praise of the Ganges, and the land of India itself has become glorious because such rivers as Ganges, Yamuna, Godavari, Kaveri, Krishna, and Narmada flow there. Anyone living on the land adjusted to the rivers is naturally advanced in spiritual consciousness. And then he quotes Madhvacharya as saying that standing on his right foot and extending his left to the edge of the universe, Lord Vaman became known as Trivikrama, the incarnation that who performed 3 heroic deeds. Right? So Srila Prabhupada talks about the potency of the rivers like Ganges and Kaveri and Krishna. There was a, I forget his name, there was an atheist poet who once wrote a poem, or more like a verse, making fun of Ganga, saying that if people by taking bath in the river Ganga become pure, then what about the fishes that live in river Ganga? They should be the purest of the pure. So he says it sarcastically. And then I was listening somewhere to one of the to one of the devotees commenting on it, saying that how do you know that the rivers in that the fishes in the river Ganga are not purified? You can make the same comment about the monkeys in Vrindavan or the hogs in Vrindavan. That people say that living in Vrindavan, we become a resident of the spiritual world. What about the dogs and the hogs? But how do you know? You're just looking at the external manifestation. So you're thinking from your platform that liberation is something that is discernible, is something that is a flash of light, and I should be able to observe it with my eyes or hear it with my ears. But how do you know that the fishes in the river Ganga, what is the destination? And the other point, of course, is that in all these things, whether living in a holy dham, taking bath in a holy river, the consciousness also makes a difference. That one who takes with the proper consciousness, the potency is always there, but the potency becomes really amplified when one approaches it in the proper consciousness. Like in the earlier part of the Bhagavatam, this point is made that one who goes to a holy place and simply has a bath is like an ass, right? So not to say the person does not get any benefit, but he's called an ass by Sutta Goswami because he's not availing of the full potency. Some benefit is there, but the full potency is when you go in the proper spirit. And there, of course, the focus is Vaishnava Sangha, that when one goes with a devotional mode in the association of devotees, then the full potency of the holy dham is revealed. So Madhvacharya here, he talks about the 3 heroic, he says Trivikrama, the 3 heroic deeds, which is Lord Vamandev, he restored the kingdom to Indra, he brought down the Ganges to the material world, and he protected Bali Maharaj by getting him under his own, giving him his own personal association and Sutal, and later on giving him the position of Indra, eventually assuring his position back to Godhead. And so these were the 3 heroic deeds. Okay, let's move on to verse 2. Go ahead, Prabhu.
Dhruv Maharaj, the famous son of Maharaj Uttanapad, is known as the most exalted devotee of the Supreme Lord because of his firm determination in executing devotional service. Knowing that the sacred Ganges water washes lotus feet of Lord Vishnu, Dhruv Maharaj, situated on his own planet of this very day, accept the water on his head with great devotion, because he constantly think of Krishna very devotedly within the core of his heart. He is overcome with ecstatic anxiety. Tears flow from his half-open eyes, and eruption appear on his entire body.
So Sukdev Goswami is now tracing the path of Ganga. So when it emerges from this crack in the universe, it falls on Dhruvaloka. And this is essentially the mercy of the Lord, because Dhruva's planet is not the highest planet in the universe. The highest planet, as we know, is Brahmaloka. And beneath the Brahmaloka are the four upper planets, Maharlok, Janalok, Tapalok, and then we have Brahmalok. All these are higher than Dhruvalok. But by the mercy of the Lord, the water first falls into the pole star or Dhruvaloka, and Dhruvaloka, understanding the mercy of the Lord, understanding the potency that this is the water from the causal ocean in which Mahavishnu is there, and this is the water that has washed the lotus feet of Vamandev. It's said in ecstatic anxiety, he accepts the water on his head. So Srila Prabhupada speaks a little bit about this term of ecstatic anxiety in devotion. And he said that when a person is firmly fixed in devotional service to the Supreme Personality of Godhead, he is described as a Virvrata. Virvrata means one who is fully determined. Such a devotee increases his ecstasy in devotional service more and more. Thus, as soon as he remembers Lord Vishnu, his eyes fill with tears. This is a symptom of a Mahabhagavad, and Dhruv Maharaj maintained himself in that devotional ecstasy. And Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu also gave us a practical example of transcendental ecstasy when he lived at Jagannath Puri. His pastimes there are fully narrated in Chaitanya Charitamrita. Okay, moving on, next verse.
The seven great sages, Marichi, Vashishta, Atri, and so on, reside on the planet beneath Dhruvaloka. Well aware of the influence of the water of the Ganges, on this day, they keep Ganges water on the tuft of their hair, on their head. They have concluded that this is the ultimate wealth, the perfection of all austerities, and the best mean of prosecuting transcendental life. Having obtained uninterrupted devotional service to the Supreme Personality of Godhead, they neglect all other beneficial processes like religion, economic development, sense gratification, and even merging into the Supreme. Just as Gyanis think that merging into the existence of the Lord is the highest truth, these seven exalted personalities accept devotional service as the perfection of life.
So the course of the Ganga is further being charted. So from the covering in the universe, it falls onto Dhravlok. Below the Dhravlok is the planet of the Saptarishis, like Marichi, Vashishta, Bhrigu, etc. So then the water falls over there. So the Saptarishi planetary system is above Svargloka and below Dhruvaloka, right? So we know that Dhruvaloka is below the upper planetary system, that of wherein we have the Janatapa Loka and all the way to Satyalok. So below that is Dhruva, and below Dhruvaloka is the planet of the Saptarishi. So the Saptarishis, so the point that is made over here is that even though the Saptarishis are famous for their austerities, they're famous for their yoga, but they do so while understanding the superiority of Bhakti. Right? They are considered to be the most knowledgeable. But even though they are on the path of knowledge, they consider the process of devotional service as a perfection of life. So Prabhupada says that this verse proves that for one who has achieved the platform of pure devotional service, nothing else is important, even the so-called liberation Kaivalya. Srila Sridhar Swami states that only by achieving pure devotional service of the Lord can one give up all other engagements as insignificant. Right? So we'll see this mood throughout, that even though there is a description of the topology of the universe, but there is also this tattva gyan that is being given. So in the last three verses, essentially, from the topological perspective, the knowledge has been given that Ganga comes from the fissure in the universe, falls on top of Dhruva and then it goes into the 7 planets. But then we also see that the mood of Dhruva Maharaj as a devotee, the symptoms of ecstasy, the mood of the Saptarishis as Gyanis and Yogis, but considering the superiority of Bhakti, render devotional service, those tattvas are also being nourished along with it. And this mood will continue in the description of the, for the most part. Some of them are just purely measurements, but generally this mood will continue. If not in the verse, it's there in the purport. Okay, verse 4.
After purifying the 7 planets near Dhruva, the pole star, the Ganges River water is carried through the spaceway of the demigod in billions of celestial airplanes. Then it inundates the moon, Chandraloka, and finally reaches Lord Brahma abode atop Mount Meru.
So one thing interesting that we see here, which will be explained later on, that Chandralok is higher than Brahmalok. Now, this is not the Brahmalok where this is not Brahma's primary planet. That Brahmalok is at the complete top of the universe. But like I mentioned, that these personalities, they have many residences. So Lord Brahma also lives here, one of his apartments, so to speak, on the top of Mount Meru. And the height of Mount Meru is less than that of the position of Chandra, because Mount Meru is part of the middle planetary system where Earth is, Bhumandal, and Chandralok is part of Swarga. So it is higher. So we see that in charting out the path, then it is said that from Dhruva it falls to the planets of Saptarishi. From there, billions of celestial airplanes carry it to Chandraloka. Right, and it's difficult for us to conceive of it, but that is what the scriptures tell us. So Prabhupada says that, and that we should always remember that the Ganges comes from the causal ocean beyond the covering of the universe. After the water of the causal ocean leaks to the hole created by Lord Vamandev, it flows to Dhruvalok, and then to the 7th planet beneath Dhruvalok. Then it is carried to the moon by innumerable celestial airplanes, and then it falls to the top of Mount Meru, which is known as Sumeru Parvat. Same name, Meru Sumeru. In this way, the water of the Ganges finally reaches the lower planets. So lower, Prabhupada is relative, like it's the middle planets, but lower with respect to the upper planets. And then it finally comes to the peak of the Himalayas. From there, it flows to Haridwar and throughout the plains of India, purifying the entire land. I'll share with you. Sometimes the picture is more easy to understand. So let me share. I'll also send this as to Prem Kishore Prabhu as tables. So this is the let's see. Okay. So this is the path that is given of the Ganges that begins from the causal ocean, comes to Dhruvaloka, goes to the planets of Satrishi, then it is carried by celestial airplanes to moon. From there it falls to Mount Meru. And one of the names of Mount Meru is also Manavati, Mount Sumeru also. From there it goes to the lower planets. Lower planets meaning the planets in the Bhumandal. From there it goes to the peak of the Himalayas, the southernmost division of Jambudvip. From there it goes to eventually to Haridwar. So we know that from Himalayas it would fall to Bharatkhanda, and here it falls to Haridwar, and thus it is purifying the entire land. Right? And now when it falls on top of Mount Meru, then it divides itself into 4 parts, and the rest of the verses will describe the path of the rivers, the four rivers around Mount Meru. Okay, so let's go to verse number 5.
On top of Mount Meru, the Ganges divides it into 4 branches, each of which gushes in a different direction, east, west, north, and south. These branches, known by the name Sita, Alakanda, Tachu, Bhadra, flown down to the ocean.
Okay, so when we were describing briefly Jambudvip, we had also mentioned that in the middle of Jambudvip is Mount Sumeru. On the top of Mount Sumeru in the middle is Brahmapuri, where Lord Brahma's secondary residence, and then around it are the 8 Lokapals there. Surya, Chandra, Vayu, Shiva. So 8 Lokapals are there. So once the water falls over here, it divides itself into 4 streams. Right? So the eastern stream is called Sita, the southern is called Alakananda, the western is called Chakshu, and the northern is called Bhadra. And so these are the 4 streams, and Sukhdev Goswami will now describe where these streams will fall. Okay. Now, one thing also we'll know is that because Jambudvip is surrounded by the saltwater ocean. So once the Ganges river falls on tops of Jambudvip and goes into the various varshas of Jambudvip, it finally empties itself into the saltwater ocean. So that's the end of the river Ganges. That's where it ends, and this will end as an independent entity. It's mentioned that the saltwater ocean is the husband of Ganges. So she meets her husband, she's happy, and she lives with him. Moving on next to verse 6.
The branch of the Ganges, known as Sita, flows through Brahmapuri atop Mount Meru, and from there it runs down to the nearby peak of the Kesharchala mountain, which stand almost as high as Mount Meru itself. These mountains are like a bunch of filaments around Mount Meru. From the Kesharchala mountain, the Ganges fall to the peak of Gandhamandana mountain, and then flow into the land of Bhadravarsha. Finally, it reaches the ocean of salt water in the west.
Okay, So similar to what was mentioned, but a little bit more detail here. So you can see the Lokapals around Indra, Agni, Yama, Niriti, Varun, Vayu, and Kuber. So I was incorrect in saying that Chandra is Lokapal. He is not. These are the eight Lokapals. And this is the flow of the rivers. You can also see the mountains on the on the left is Malyan, on the right is Gandhamadan. So the rivers will fall into the respective mountains. Okay. Okay, the next verse.
The branch of the Ganges known as Kachu fall on the summit of Malavan mountain and from there cascades onto the land of Kutumala Varsha. The Ganges flow incessantly through Ketumala Varsha and in this way also reaches the ocean of salt water in the west.
So, as we mentioned, that surrounding Sumeru, there is a filament of mountain known as Keshachal, and they are almost as high as Mount Meru. And the Varshas that have been described over here, they are part of Jambudvip. So these mountains, the Malyavan mountain, the Gandhamanda mountain, they are essentially dividing the Dweep into Varshas. So the branch of the Ganges that is known as Chakshu. So Chakshu is the west, the one that goes on the west. So the Goswami starts and then goes clockwise from there. So the one that is going on west and Chakshu, it falls on the Malyavan mountain, and from the Malyavan it goes into the Ketumal Varsha, and from the Ketumal Varsha it flows into the saltwater ocean in the west. Okay, next verse.
The branch of the Ganges known as Bhadra flow from the northern side of Mount Meru. Its water fall onto the peak of Kumunda mountain, known Mount Nila, Shweta mountain, and Shringavan mountain in succession. Then it ran down into the province of Kuru, and after crossing through the land, flew into the saltwater ocean in the north.
Okay, so this is the northern range. Maybe I'll just share. Maybe. So this is the northern range. Bhadra River. It flows into Kesarchal and then to Nilaswet Shrangwan, and from there to Kuru. So Vishwanath Chakravarti said that it skips over three Varshas: Ilavarta, Ramyak, and Hiranmaya. So these three Varshas, they don't receive the water of Ganges, just because of the way that it flows down. Okay, next verse.
Similarly, the branch of the Ganges known as Alakananda flow from the southern side of Brahmapuri, Brahmasadam. Passing over the tops of mountains in various lands, it falls down with fierce force upon the peaks of mountain Himakuta and Himakuta. After inundating the tops of those mountains, the Ganges fall down onto the tract of land known as Bharatvarsha, which she also inundated. Then the Ganges flow into the ocean salt water in the south. Persons who come to bath in this river are fortunate. It is not very difficult for them to achieve with every step the result of performing great sacrifices like the Rajasuya and the Ashwamedhava Yagna.
So this is the branch that finally comes down to the Earth planet, right? So it's known as Alaknanda, and the Ganges that flows through India. One of the names it also has is Alaknanda for this reason, because its original branch is called Alaknanda. It comes from the southern side of Brahmapuri. And Vishwanath Chakravarti says that skipping over 3 Varshas, Ilavat, Ramyak, and Hiranmaya, the river Ganges falls from peaks to peak. And then he says this sentence should be understood. Bharatam Abhivarsham should mean falling over Bharat Varsha. So the river skipping over many Varshas flows down to the mountain, to the Varsha bordering the ocean of salt water, and with bowed head, so to speak, enter the ocean of their husband to give up their right. Right. So this is the path of Ganges. There is also this glorification of the Earth planet. This is the Bharat Khanda, the Earth planet, where the person who come to bathe in these rivers are very fortunate. And so it is not very difficult for them to achieve with every step, the results of performing great sacrifices like Rajasuya and Ashwamedha. So these sacrifices are difficult to perform, but the inhabitants of this planet, they are lucky, and various reasons are given for them to be lucky. One is that the river Ganges itself is coming directly to this planet after skipping over other Varshas, and the other is that the planet has the footprint of the Supreme Personality of Godhead Krishna himself. It is the place of pastimes of different great incarnations and personalities, very dear to the Lord. So the residents of this planet are considered to be very, very fortunate. Srila Prabhupada adds some more context to it. He says that the place where the Ganges flows into the salt water of the Bay of Bengal is known as Ganga Sagar, or the meeting place of the Ganges and the Bay of Bengal. On Makar Sankranti, in the month of January/February, thousands of people still go there to bathe, hoping to be liberated. That they can actually be liberated in the way is confirmed over here. For those who bathe in Ganges anytime, the results of great sacrifices like Ashwamedha and Rajasuya Yagya are not at all difficult to achieve. Most people in India are still inclined to bathe in the Ganges, and there are many places that they do so. At Prayag, Allahabad, many thousands of people gather during the month of January to bathe in the confluence of Ganga and Yamuna. Afterwards, many of them do so at the confluence of the Bay of Bengal and Ganges to take bath over there. Thus, it is a special facility for all the people of India that they can bath in the water of Ganges at so many places of pilgrimage. Okay, let me pause over here and see if there's any discussion so far.
Prabhu, one thing I was thinking about the moon planet, Chandra. When we were talking about the Chandra here, we saw that it is much higher. It's not the Chandra that we know, Earth planet and the moon that we know here, our moon. And I think it's totally different thing. And sometimes there was some confusion, like Prabhupada said that nobody can go on the moon planet, and there are people living there, not people, living entities there. Maybe I'm thinking he was referring to that moon, not our moon.
Yeah, I mean, to be honest with you, I did not hear that there's a different Chandra. That is, I mean, the one that we see is the one that is worshipped as the Chandralok. The point that you make is valid, that Prabhupada said that it's a heavenly planet, cannot be accessed through mechanical means. And he says the planet, is covered by a veil of illusion. So people who go to the planet are basically see, because the Chandralok is divided half and half, right? Half of it is inhabited by Pitras, and half of it is inhabited by the demigods. But the whole of it is opulent. Even the Pitraloka is at a higher level. So he says, anywhere that you go in Chandra, there is opulence, but through mechanical means, and Prabhupada gives some examples also how people who were trying to access the Lord through mechanical means get bewildered. I forget, he gave some examples also of somebody who was trying to physically, through like just brute power, trying to access the Lord, and essentially they get a false version of the Lord. But later on, when we study the structure of the universe, then we will see how this Chandra is actually the Chandra that appears in our sky, and how statements like that the Chandra is higher than the Surya, because astronomically we say that Chandra is basically orbiting the Earth and the Sun is far away. So this later on the statement is made that the Sun is closer to the Earth than the Moon, and then we'll see what are the geometrical dimensions that justify this statement.
Thank you.
Hare Krishna. Regarding Ganges coming down, we also hear about Lord Shiva taking on his head. That is not here. That's not mentioned here. Is it coming in the future, or is it not mentioned in the Bhagavatam at all?
No, it's mentioned later on, like I said, in the 8th canto. It's mentioned in it. So when it is said that it falls on the Himalayas, that's when it falls on Lord Shiva. Not the Himalayas that are on the Earth planet, but the Himalayas that are in Jambudvip. Like there's the original Himalaya, the one that we have is a namesake. The original Himalaya that is there in Jambudvip, which is several thousands of miles tall. Lord Shiva has an abode over there, and he accepts. So you see that the Ganges is already 1/4, right? It's already divided into 4. But even that 1/4 is so powerful that it could have swept away the Earth planet. So then Lord Shiva accepts it on his head, and he allows it to then go slowly. That's why it's called Mandakini also. So Mand means slow, Mand, slowly. So then he allows it to go slowly after that to protect the Earth planet. Mentioned later on in the subsequent canto.
Thank you.
Prabhu, that means Dhruv took the full blow of Ganges River. It was not divided at that time.
It wasn't divided. That is correct.
Because they say that no ordinary person can take this weight of the Ganges. That means Dhruv take 3 times more.
He does. And so do the Saptarishis, so does Mount Sumeru. The entire flow of the river Ganges falls on Mount Sumeru. And then it gets divided to 4. And at one point it said that even after it gets divided, it further gets divided into many sister branches. So the river also becomes, it does not flow as a single river. It falls over different mountain peaks, gets divided, and ultimately goes into the saltwater ocean. So one can imagine, as you're saying, the original force, how strong would it be?
Okay.
Okay. No other question? Let's move on to verse 10.
Many other rivers, both big and small, flow from the top of Mount Meru. These rivers are like daughters of the mountain, and they flow to the various tracts of land in hundreds of branches.
Right. So these are other rivers that are either tributaries of Ganga, or they're rivers that are originating from Mount Meru itself, and then they flow into hundreds of branches. Okay. Next verse.
Among the 9 varshas, The tract of land known as Bharatvarsha is understood to be the field of fruitive activities. Learned scholar and saintly persons declare the other 8 Varsha to be meant for very highly elevated pious persons. After returning from the heavenly planet, they enjoy the remaining result of the pious activities in these 8 earthly Varshas.
So now there's a little bit of description of the Varsha. So far, we had seen 11th Varsha, which was the central Varsha, and little bit of description of Bharat Varsha, the southernmost Varsha. Total there are nine Varshas. So Varshas in Sanskrit means valley. Just like Dvipa means island, Varsha means a piece of land between two mountains. Right. So essentially that's what a valley is. So the Bhumandal is divided into Dvipas by the oceans, like the saltwater ocean, the sugarcane juice ocean, right? That's why it becomes Dvipas. Then the Dvipas are divided into Varshas by mountains. So these mountains crisscross the Dvipas and they create this Varshas. Jambudvipa is divided into 9 Varshas. So the other 8 Varshas are described, and they are known as Bhaumya Svarga. Right? So there are three categories of Svargas. There is the Divya Svarga, then there is the Bhauma Svarga, and there is the Bila Svarga. Right? So the characteristics of the Svargas are somewhat similar in terms of opulence. The mood is different. Like in Bila Svarga, there is not much devotional service over there. There is a lot of material opulence. In the Divya Svarga, there is more acknowledgement of the personality of Godhead. And so in the Bhaum Svarga, but to a lesser extent. The opulences are also less in the Bhaum Svarga compared to the Divya Svarga. Then it's also mentioned that the residents of Divya Svarga, they come down to that when their pious activities are exhausted, then they fall out of Divya Svarga, but they come down to Bhauma Svarga to enjoy the remaining pious activities that they may have. And so they don't fall directly, or they do not always fall directly to the earth planet. Right? That's some Bhagavad Gita that's mentioned that they fall directly. May happen, may not happen, but it's also mentioned that in order to enjoy the residual pious credits that the Divya Svarga residents have, they come down to Bhaum Svarga. And the Bila Svarga is meant for gross materialists. So Srila Prabhupada writes in the purport that the heavenly places of enjoyment are divided into 3 groups. The celestial heavenly planets, the heavenly places on earth. Here earth means Bhumandal. And the Bila heavenly planets, which are found in the lower regions. Among these 3 classes of heavenly places, Bhauma Svarga Padani, the heavenly place on earth, are the 8 Varshas other than Bharat Varsha. Right? So Bharat Varsha is not considered to be a Bhauma Svarga, but the other 8 Varshas are considered to be Bhauma Svarga. Right? And Srila Prabhupada also talks about whenever there is the mention of these heavenly planets, he also talks about the futility of aspiring to be in the heavenly planets. Like he always mentioned that you'll fall down again and again just to perform devotional service. Okay, moving on to verse 12.
In 8 Varsha, or tract of land, human beings live 10,000 years according to earthly calculation. All the inhabitants are also like almost like demigod. They have the bodily strength of 10,000 elephants. Indeed, their bodies are as sturdy as thunderbolt. The youthful duration of their life is very pleasing, and both men and women enjoy sexual union with great pleasure for a long time. After years of sensual pleasure, when a balance of 1 year remains, the wife conceives a child. Thus, the standard of the pleasure for the resident of the heavenly region is actually like that of the human being who live during Treta Yuga.
So, description of the residents of these 8 Bhaumas Swargas, they live for 10,000 years, and it's mentioned that there is no old age, there is no disease, there is no premature death. So everybody lives 10,000 years. In the last year, the woman conceive a child, but before that, for the remaining of the 10,000 years, they enjoy with a body that is as strong as thunderbolt, which means that it is suitable for pleasures. That they enjoy a lot of pleasures, among which is the sexual union that they enjoy for many years, and their level of opulence is compared to the human beings. So these are those who live on the Bharatvarsha during Treta Yuga. So in Krishna Chakravarti says that in Satyug, everyone is fixed in meditation. So there is no desire for material enjoyment. In the Dwapar and Kali Yuga, there is a desire for material enjoyment, but by the influence of time, there is a lot of suffering. So Treta Yuga is described as equivalent to Bhauma Sarga, where there is a desire for material enjoyment and there is facility to enjoy material also. The Prabhupada says that another point in this verse is that in all these 8 varshas, although the men and women enjoy sexual pleasure, there is no pregnancy. And so he makes this point that limited offsprings is a sign of advancement, not necessarily spiritual advancement, but just evolutionary advancement. Right? So he says that the lower form of lives, like snakes, they can have hundreds and thousands of eggs, and animals may conceive twice a year or every year. In the humans, it is much lesser over there. So the fact that in this Bhauma Swarga, they have only one child in their entire life, it is an indication that they are further evolved. So Prabhupada said this verse informs us that in grades of life higher than ours, pregnancy occurs once in a lifetime. People still have sex life, but there is no pregnancy. In the spiritual world, people are not very attracted to sex life due to their exalted devotional attitude. Practically speaking, there is no sex in the spiritual. There is no sex life in the spiritual world. But even if sometime it does occur, there is no pregnancy at all. And this is a statement that gets one of Prabhupada's purports that gets quoted when people ask things like this, that is the conjugal relationship in the spiritual world. And then this part of the purport is often quoted, that in the spiritual world, there is practically speaking no sex life. But there is still full free will. So because of the manifestation of free will, sometimes sex can occur. But even if it occurs, there's no pregnancy. And it is often done as a service to Krishna in some form. Prabhupada goes on to say that on the planet Earth, however, human beings do become pregnant, although the tendency is to avoid having children. In the sinful age of Kali, people have taken to the process of killing the child in the womb. This is the most degraded practice. It can only perpetuate the miserable material condition of those who perform it. Okay, moving on to next, verse 13.
In each of those tracts of land, there are many gardens filled with flowers and fruits according to the season, and there are beautifully decorated hermitages as well. Between the great mountain demarcating the border of those lands lie enormous lakes of clear water filled with newly grown lotus flowers. Aquatic birds such as swan, ducks, water chicken, and crane become greatly excited by the fragrance of lotus flower, and the charming sound of bumblebee fill the air. The inhabitants of those lands are important leaders among the demigods. Always attended by their respective servants, they enjoy life in gardens alongside the lake. In this pleasing situation, the wife of the demigod smiled playfully and at their husband, and look upon them with lusty desires. All the demigod and their wife are constantly supplied with sandalwood bulbs and flower garlands by their servant. In this way, all the residents of the 8 heavenly Varsha enjoy, attracted by the activities of the opposite sex.
So note that Prabhupada, Sukadeva Goswami, he calls the residents of the 8 Varshas also demigods. Right? So they're in the category of demigods, even though slightly lower category, but nevertheless, they're in the category of devas. And Prabhupada notes that it's important to understand that while the residents of Bhaumi Swarga enjoy materially, they never forget the Lord. And the difference is, that's the difference between, so Bila Swarga will be described later on in the 24th chapter of this canto. So that's one big difference, that while the propensity to enjoy materially is there in all the 3 Swargas, but the difference is how much of it is centered around the Lord. So Prabhupada writes in the purport that here is a description of the lower heavenly planets. The inhabitants of those planets enjoy life in a pleasing atmosphere of clear lakes, filled with newly grown lotus flowers, and garden filled with fruit, flowers, various kinds of birds, and humming bees. In that atmosphere, they enjoy life with a very beautiful wives, who are always sexually stimulated. Nonetheless, they are all devotees of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, as will be explained in subsequent verses. The inhabitants of this earth also desire the inhabitant of this earth, now he's talking about the earth we live in, also desire such heavenly enjoyment, but when they somehow or else achieve imitation pleasure like sex and intoxication, they completely forget the service of the Supreme Lord. In heavenly planets, however, although the residents enjoy superior sense gratification, they never forget their position as the eternal servants of the Supreme Being. Okay. Moving on, verse 14.
To show mercy to his devotees in each of these 9 tracts of land, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, known as Narayan, expands himself in his quadruple principle of Vasudeva, Sankarshana, Pradyumna, and Aniruddha. In this way, he remains near his devotee to accept their service.
So Vishwanath Chakravarti comments on this that the word to show his mercy, it should be understood as continuing to show his mercy. And then he further comments that the word Atma Tattva Vyuhena, when it is said that the Lord manifests as Atma Tattva Vyuhena, it means that the Lord continues to show his mercy by manifesting in these Varshas in his deity form. So Atma Tattva Vyuhena. Right? So the deity being non-different from the Lord, Atma Tattva Vyuhena, but a manifestation in a material form. So he says that this will be confirmed later on in 5.18.7 by Prahlad Maharaj. Srila Prabhupada also comments on this statement of Vishwanath Chakravarti. He says that in this connection, Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur informs us that the demigod worship the Supreme Lord in his various deity forms, Archavikra, because except in the spiritual world, the personality of Godhead cannot be directly worshipped in person. In the material world, the Lord is always worshipped as Archavikra or deity in the temple. There is no difference between Archavikra and the original person, and therefore, those who are engaged in worshipping the deity in the temple in full opulence, even on this planet, should be understood to be directly in touch with the personality of Godhead without a doubt. As enjoined in the Shastras, Archa Vishnu Shiladhir Gurushu Naramati. No one should treat the deity in the temple as stone or metal. No one should think that the spiritual master is an ordinary human. One should strictly follow this Shastric injunction and worship the deity, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, without offenses. The spiritual master is the direct representation of the Lord, and no one should consider him an ordinary human being. By avoiding offenses against the deity and the spiritual master, one can advance in the spiritual life of Krishna consciousness. So this is essentially setting the stage of the prayers by the residents of the 9 varshas, right? So Sukadeva Goswami is saying that the Lord expands. So Chaturvya is the 4 Vishnu expansion, but actually, obviously, there are 9 varshas. So he expands into other forms, and these expansions are worshipped in the varshas in the deity form. Prabhupada also provides a quotation from Laghu Bhagavatamrita to further expand on this. He says that in the Padma Purana, it is said that in the spiritual world, the Lord personally expands in all directions and is worshipped as Vasudev, Sankarshan, Pradyumna, and Anirudh. The same God is represented by deity in this material world, which is only a quarter of the creation. Vasudev, Sankarshan, Pradyumna, and Anirudh are also present in the 4 directions of this material world. There is a Vaikuntha lok covered with water in this material world, and on that planet is a place called Vedavati, where Vasudev is located. And so this will come later on, that this Vaikuntha lok in the material world. So there are more than 1 places in the material world that are considered to be, while in the material world spiritual. One of them is Vaikuntha, which was created by the Lord in one of his incarnations called Vikuntha. And in order to please Lakshmi Devi, his consort, he creates this planet called Vaikuntha lok. And on that planet is a place called Vedavati, and there Vasudeva is located. Then Prabhupada says there's another planet known as Vishnu Loka that is situated over Satya Loka, where Sankarshan is present. Similarly, in Dwarkapuri, Pradyumna is the predominator, and on the island known as Shvetadvip, there is an ocean of milk, and in the midst of that ocean is a place called Eravatipura, where Aniruddha lies on Anand. So Aniruddha, as we know, is the source of the Paramatma. So we see that the demigods often go to Shvetadvip, and they pray, and essentially they're praying to Aniruddha. So Aniruddha is essentially, Lord Aniruddha is the super soul, or in that form, he's the super soul for the universe. So he's lying in. I'm sorry. He's the super soul of the collective entities of the universe. Garbhodaksha Vishnu is considered to be the super soul of the universe, and Aniruddha is considered to be the collective super soul, representing the collective super soul. And there's of course then the super soul that resides in our heart. So Prabhupada talks about the 4 spiritual residents of the quadruple expansion of Krishna. There is Vaikuntha Loka, there is Vishnu Loka, there is Dwarkapuri, and there is Shvetadvip. So sometimes it is mentioned in this connection that like when Durvasa Rishi was trying to run away from Sudarshan Chakra, then he went to Vaikuntha to Lord Vishnu to ask for support, help And they said, how could he have crossed over from the material world? The understanding is he did not. He visited one of these spiritual planets in the material world. Same point is made for the four Kumaras also, that they did not actually go to the spiritual world per se, but they went to one of these planets. In some of the Sattva Tantras, there is the description of the 9 mantras, 9 varshas, and the predominant deity worshipped in each. And Prabhupada gives the 9 deities: Vasudev, Sankarshan, Pradyumna, Anirudh, Narayan, Narsimha, Hayagriv, Mahavara, and Brahma. And then he says that the Brahma here is not the Brahma who is the Jiva, but Prabhupada mentions that sometimes there is no qualified Jiva to take the post of Brahma, and the Lord then becomes Brahma. So this refers to that Brahma who is non-different from the Lord. Just like sometimes there is no qualified person to take Indra, and the Lord becomes Indra. So this happened when the Lord came as Yajna, and he became Indra also. Okay, moving on to verse 15.
Sukadev Goswami said, in the tract of land known as Ilavarta Varsha, the only male person is Lord Shiva, the most powerful demigod. Goddess Durga, the wife of Lord Shiva, does not like any man to enter that land. If any foolish man dare to do so, she immediately turned him into a woman. I shall explain this later in the 9th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam.
Yes, so he says Vakshyami, that I'll explain it later. So the pastime that happened here was that once they were, this is in the first chapter of the 9th canto, that once there was a group of saintly people who were spiritually very advanced devotees of Lord Shiva. So they came to Ilavartvarsha in a view of Vaishnava Sangha, taking instructions from Lord Shiva, getting his darshan. But when they entered into Ilavartvarsha, Parvati Devi, at that time, she was without clothes, and she was sitting on the lap of her husband, embracing him, and she became very embarrassed and ashamed on seeing these saintly people enter. And when these sages saw Parvati Devi in that form, they closed their eyes and went away. But nevertheless, Parvati Devi was very much embarrassed. So Lord Shiva, so it said that the saintly persons left Ilavarta and they went to the ashram of Narayan. And then to please his wife, Lord Shiva, he cast this curse, so to speak. He says that any male entering into this palace will immediately become a woman. Right? And later on, we see that there is this pastime that happens in Mahabharata, where there is this king named as Sudumna. And Sudumna unknowingly enters into Ilavartvarsha, and then he becomes a woman. And so it's a long custom. And then Lord Shiva he prays to Lord Shiva for some, because he's also the emperor. So then Lord Shiva says that for some time you'll be a man, sometimes you'll be a woman. I think 1 month on, 1 month man, 1 month woman, or 6 month man, 6 month woman, something like that. So as a woman, he marries Buddha. So Buddha, as we know, is the son of moon god, right? So he marries Buddha, and then he has the son known as Pururava. And from Pururava, the whole dynasty then comes. And then later on, Sudumna is given this choice that, okay, enough of this, you pick one thing, what do you want? Because the citizens were complaining that it's very confusing. Sometimes a king is a queen and sometimes the king is a king. So it's he's given a choice, so he chooses to become a woman, and then everybody is surprised, why did he choose to become a woman? And then he says that the enjoyment that I experience as a woman is a lot more than as a man. So then finally he gets a woman's body. And then Pururava, of course, has his own pastime with the Apsaras there. So here the glories of 11th Varsha is kind of been given. That the only male in 11th Varsha is Lord Shiva. Vishnu Chakravarti also comments that it does not extend to the entire 11th Varsha. Because he said if it did extend to the entire 11th Varsha, then other statements that are made about the Varsha as being a heavenly place where demigods enjoy, great devotees of the Lord, sages live, that would be untrue. So he gives a more specific area in the 11th Varsha, from this mountain range to that mountain range. Only in this subset of 11th Varsha is Lord Shiva's curse active, and people are careful, the residents of that area careful not to cross into that area. Okay, we'll do one more verse and pause for any discussion after that.
In the 11th Varsha, Lord Shiva is always encircled by 10 billion maidservants of Goddess Durga, who minister to him. The quadruple expansion of Supreme Lord is composed of Vasudev, Pradyumna, Anidura, and Sankarshan. Sankarshan, the fourth expansion, is certainly transcendental, but because his activity of destruction in the material world or the mode of ignorance, he is known as Tamasi, the Lord form in the mode of ignorance. Lord Shiva, known as Sankarshan, is the original cause of his own existence, and thus he always meditates upon him in trance by chanting the following mantra.
So this is now setting the stage for introducing both the prominent devotee and deity. So in 11th Varsha, Lord Shiva is the prominent devotee, and Sankarshan is the worshipable deity. So Vishnu Chakravarti says that Sankarshan is the form in charge of destruction. It's called Tamasi. And even though he is so called Tamasi, the form is purely spiritual beyond the three modes. And later on, we'll see the verses 19, 20, 21, where when Lord Shiva is praying to Sankarshan, he glorifies him as being completely transcendental. So Prabhupada says that sometimes we see a picture of Lord Shiva engaged in meditation. This word explains that Lord Shiva is always meditating upon Lord Sankarshan in trance. Lord Shiva is in charge of the destruction of the material world. Lord Brahma creates and Vishnu maintains it. Lord Shiva destroys it. But because destruction is in the mode of ignorance, Lord Shiva and his worshipful deity Sankarshan are technically called Tamasi. Lord Shiva is the incarnation of the Tamogun. Since both Lord Shiva and Sankarshan are always enlightened and situated in the transcendental position, they have nothing to do with the modes of material nature, goodness, passion, and ignorance. But because their activities involve them with the mode of ignorance, they are sometimes called Tamasi. Prabhupada kind of explains what will be explained later on, that there's a difference between being in charge of a mode and being under the mode. So Lord Shiva is in charge of the mode of ignorance. And Lord Sankarshan, similarly, he's in charge of the destruction. But both of them have a transcendental position. Lord Sankarshan more so. It's like saying that I am charitable, my neighbor is charitable, but the neighbor gives 90% of his income in charity, I give 10% of my income in charity. So both of us are charitable, but different levels. So Lord Sankarshan is transcendental, Lord Shiva is transcendental. But there's a difference that Lord Sankarshan is completely transcendental. He is Vishnu Tattva. The modes cannot even touch him. Lord Shiva is transcendental, but he's touched by the modes. Like Shiram Yatha Dadi Vikar Vishesha Yoga Sanjayate Nahi Tatha Prathagasti Hetu Ya Shambhutam Api Tatha Samupeti Karya. And so milk becomes yogurt by the touch of acid. So it is still milk, no difference. But difference is that milk becomes yogurt and yogurt cannot become milk. There is a trace of the influence of the acid. So Lord Shiva is transcendental and Lord Sankarshan is transcendental. But because they voluntarily take on this service, sometimes called tamasi. So next week we will recite this wonderful Sankarshan mantra together, which gives us control over our senses, especially tamasic, like control over anger and fear. This is the mantra that is recited by Lord Shiva to invoke Lord Sankarshan. So we'll do that next week. Let me stop over here and see if there's any discussion. Okay, if not, then we'll stop here. Like I said, I have the tables that I've shown you. I'll send them to Prem Kishore Prabhu, and he can share it with you. So also a good idea to go over them once again while reading the verses, because I think the picture gives a better placement of the topology. Okay, so we'll end it. Panchakalpatarubhyascha kripasindhubhya eva Haritanama Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namah Anantakoti Vaishnavinda ki Jai Srila Prabhupada ki Jai Jai Gaur Premanande. Hare Krishna. Thank you so much.